if you have taken it, please make sure to at least challenge 5 other people to take it. It's very, very important that we are counted and we are that we all take the census. So please make sure to fill out the census. We'd love to see all your beautiful faces. So if you can please turn on your cameras, that would be very helpful and we'd very much appreciate that. So today's format is that we're going to be doing this a little bit more interview style. I have some questions prepared for Mara, and then afterwards we're going to be opening up the floor, as always, to your questions. You can leave them in the chat or the comments box, and then we will get to them in order that they are received. So now I want to formally introduce our guest of honor of today. Mara joined UNRWA USA in February 2020 as its new executive director. In this role, Mara leads a team of 8 in the United States to educate the American public about the plight of Palestinian refugees and raise funds for UNRWA's critical programs in the Middle East. Having focused most of her career on international development, Mara has over 15 years of experience designing, implementing, and leading youth development programming in the Middle East and North Africa region. Mara has extensive leadership experience in youth development with a strong focus on program design and development, organizational capacity strengthening, and multi-sectoral partnership cultivation and collaboration. Mara previously served as regional director of MENA and UNRWA programs at the International Youth Foundation, where she worked for over a decade. She earlier held positions at Ahmed East and the American University in Cairo. At Ahmed East, Mara managed corporate foundation and individual fundraising efforts and managed the Fulbright Scholarship Program for students from the MENA region. Mara was a U.S. Fulbright grantee to Syria herself between 2011 and 2003, and while in Syria managed a U.S. State Department-funded teacher training project and UNRWA's English Language Club for Palestinian vocational students. Mara holds a master's degree in Near Eastern Studies from New York University and a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Stanford University. It is an absolute pleasure and honor to have you with us today, Mara.
Thank you, Ronya. It's a pleasure for me to be here as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to actually pin your screen so that everybody can see it. Okay, so we're going to get into the first question. So Mara, you've worked 20 years in international development focused on youth programming. How do you get involved with that, and what made you make the switch to humanitarian fundraising work?
Great, Rania. And just before I answer that, just a note on the census. I was filling it out a couple months ago, and as I mentioned to Rania just before the call, my husband happens to be Moroccan, and so it was such a pleasure to be able to say that my kids were, had Moroccan ancestry, that they were Arab Americans on the census, and I hadn't seen any other location since they were born. They're 9-year-old twins, that I was able to express that part of their ethnicity, because they're Moroccan American. They have both sides of the 2 different ethnic sides to them. So it was such a pleasure to be able to have that recognized by the U.S. So fully support your efforts there. So I don't want to repeat, thank you for introducing me. Don't want to repeat what Rania has just said, but just to say that over those, it was almost 20 years now, working in work related to the Middle East and North Africa, a lot around youth issues. I had the opportunity to travel back and forth a lot, and I spent a very formative part of my life living in Syria and Damascus, and this was in 2001 to 2003. I think part of this was because a lot of my friends in Damascus at the time were, a lot of my closest friends were from Yarmouk refugee camp. I'd already been kind of sensitized to the Palestinian issue, but being so close to, it was one family in particular, the Shahinat, if they're online listening, and just really got to know, and a couple of other families in Yarmouk really got to know day-to-day life of my friends, and then had the opportunity, as you stated, to run an English language club for Palestinian refugees at the UNRWA Vocational Training Center. Now, mind you, this was some 20 years ago, so for my life to come full circle where I get to lead UNRWA USA is really a blessing, and something I might not have predicted that my life would go full circle 20 years ago. But at this vocational training center, not only did I have such a great relationship and just so appreciate the principal, or the director of the school, Fawzi Al-Medfa, who might be listening as well, and is such a wonderful man. He's the director of the school. But I had this great opportunity to interact with these intelligent, thoughtful students in the English language club, because the club was all about using English to express ourselves, and we got to ask and answer a lot of questions about each other, and really get to know each other. And I think already I knew that the media in the US and the history that we learn has a viewpoint. Already I knew that, but being able to talk directly to people about their lives, about their values, it just reinforced how we're all human and we share so much in common. And it was just a transformational part of my life. Upon my return to the US, I then served on the board of Interfaith Peace Builders, which is now called Eyewitness Palestine. I served on that board for 5 years, and that is an amazing organization that brings Americans to the region to witness, to see the conflict for their own eyes, and work with those and get to hear from those who are advocating and working toward a just peace in the region. So again, that was a labor of love and something extremely important to me. And then was involved in youth development, running IYF's work, our International Youth Foundation's work in the Middle East and North Africa. Got to travel back and forth to the region many, many times, and got to spend some excellent time in Ramallah. I haven't yet been to Gaza. We were supposed to go this year, and then the COVID-19 happened. So that's my first trip as soon as we all can get back on the plane again. But worked with many different NGOs in Palestine, and just have always felt a special kindred and really you know, wanting to, frankly, you know, wanting to educate Americans more and more about some aspects of the world that they don't understand, again, because of that limited viewpoint that the media gives us. And I think right now, coming to UNRWA is just so important. You know, clearly our government in defunding UNRWA to the tune of $360 million, almost a third of UNRWA's budget, is not doing the job they need to do. This is a humanitarian organization providing essential food, health, housing, education services to Palestinian refugees, many times in place of state-sponsored services where there just aren't, the state does not have the ability to give those services. They're the #1 provider of such services. They educate, UNRWA educates 530,000 Palestinian youth, refugee youth in 5 field sites in obviously Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and then in Lebanon and Syria and Jordan. So it's unfortunately, because there has not been a political solution to the conflict, the organization persists. But in lieu of a political solution, it is the only organization providing necessary humanitarian assistance. Our government hasn't stepped up. Being a part of UNRWA USA allows us to appeal to the compassion and generosity of Americans, and we've gotten so much support over the years, and we in turn take that support and contribute it to UNRWA. So it gives you a little flavor of how I got to this issue, how I joined UNRWA USA, and what some of our objectives are.
That's the first thing I'm going to say. You definitely have a lot under your belt, and I'm sure you're going to bring all of that into your new position. And I for one, I love UNRWA USA. They're a very valued partner for PAC. We've worked with them endlessly and on many different opportunities. And then also when, you know, part of one of our programs, we have the Homeland Project, and we always visit the refugee camps. And I feel like it's impossible to go into a refugee camp without UNRWA being mentioned. So the work that you guys are doing is really impacting the people on the ground. So thank you, and thank you to everyone at UNRWA USA. So to transition to our next question, and you mentioned it very well with COVID and with everything kind of, you know, being lifted and changed, and, you know, the future is unknown. 4 months into the job, what's the day in the life of the UNRWA USA Executive Director like?
Thank you, Rania. I'm sure you have many thoughts on the same subject. You know, serving in the same capacity in your organization at PAC. It's challenging. You know, we have a much smaller team, I presume, than you guys. We have eight people who sometimes feel, oh no, your team is smaller. Okay.
We're 4 people.
So we're huge. Okay, we're huge.
Yes,
so
you're double our size.
you just appear bigger.
That's a good thing. I will take that as a compliment.
Punch above your weight, they say, like in boxing. So excellent. will like your 4 people. They probably feel like 8 people. Our 8 people feel like 16, a mighty group. We've been doing well as a team online, and luckily I had 2 months at the office getting to know everybody on a much more face-to-face, in a much more face-to-face way before transitioning to the virtual environment. So we're fine. I do think there are, and we've been able to have our meetings, and we have, I don't know what you guys do there, but every Wednesday we have a little huddle, we call it, where we get on and we don't talk about work, but we talk about, we do an icebreaker or play a silly game just to get connected. I think those of us with families, we have kind of outlets, but I think particularly for the younger people who might be still single, who are living alone, you know, I think it's very important to have that social outlet and to be able to connect with each other. I think the hardest thing when it comes to work, and I'm curious for your thoughts too, Rania, the hardest thing is, for me, has been the kind of brainstorming or innovation activities that you would do as a team in front of a whiteboard, and you're all standing around the room, writing things, crossing things, you know, kind of pushing the person over, no, I gotta write this, and it's a very dynamic exercise where you drive off each other's energy. Being able to do that online, I haven't quite found, there are some tools I've been playing with, which are like virtual whiteboards, but just, and we're all in there moving stuff on the virtual whiteboard, but it just doesn't feel the same. And so I felt a little bit like innovation, creative thinking, brainstorming has been harder. And then the other key challenge is, you know, we have luckily so many partners like PAC at UNRWA USA, but in trying to reach out to, let's say, sponsors for our 5K events, or kind of, or new foundations, or, you know, that might be able to support our work, kind of cultivating new relationships is a little bit harder. You know, it's so nice to sit down with people, shake their hand, face to face, share food ideally, and, you know, online it just feels a little bit different. So certainly, maybe it'll be better as we get used to this, because it is getting easier, I think, as we get used to Zoom.
Yeah, definitely. I think this whole thing has given everyone an opportunity to brainstorm way out of the box and think of different, you know, realities and different ways of making things happen. Actually, Palestine Monday, which is the series, actually started from that same conversation, which it was like in a meeting, we're like, let's think of something we can do while, you know, now we no longer have our physical space, we can't use it, let's think of something online, and
Wonderful.
This was born. So
wow.
Yeah. So yeah, but definitely I can completely agree and empathize with everything you said. It's definitely a challenge, but you guys are doing amazing work, and I want to encourage everybody. I know there are 5Ks coming on, and they're going to be doing this virtually, and I hear very exciting plans are coming.
Yes, we'll tell you more about it. Yes, definitely.
So to transition to the next question, what are some of the most pressing challenges that you feel like are currently being faced by the Palestinian refugees right now amid this COVID-19 pandemic?
Right. Yeah, it's obviously an extremely difficult moment. I mean, globally, we're all facing it here, especially, I mean, in the US, these numbers are rising in many locations. Hopefully you guys in the New York, New Jersey area, it's going down still, but you know, the global pandemic is affecting everybody, of course. In Palestine, of course, it is that much more difficult because of the population density, and a lot of the Palestine refugees living, of course, in refugee camps, which are some of the most most dense in terms of population, some of the most dense areas in terms of population in the world. Gaza, of course, being one of the most dense, the single most dense polities in the world. So just to zero in a little bit and give a little specificity, maybe I'll just talk about the West Bank and Gaza. We did just hear from our UNRWA counterparts, the folks leading the efforts in the West Bank, Gwen Lewis and Matthias Schmale leading UNRWA efforts in Gaza. And in both situations, in both field sites of UNRWA, basically, as soon as they saw the pandemic coming, as soon as they saw the virus coming, they were very quick to act, and they shut down all schools immediately. And obviously, this was because once the pandemic hits, once the virus hits, they were worried about these highly populated areas, school being the main place where people are populating, but also there were, particularly in Gaza, food distribution sites where people, residents would go to the food distribution site, and rather than having it set up that way, they immediately put into effect remote operations. So they had the food then come to the individual houses of people, and that was to limit the large congregations of people. In Gaza, and particularly, you can only, it's not very hard to imagine that should the virus get into Gaza itself, it could spread like wildfire. There's limited clean water, sanitation, and then you have, of course, as we mentioned, this highly dense population. So it was all of our fears in March that the virus could get in, and frankly, there would be no way to stop it in a place like Gaza. And this is all the more scary because of just the absolute limitation on ICU, on intensive care units in Gaza, and the number of ventilators you can count on two hands. So, and we're talking, you know, about a population of 1.8 million people at least. So, so what UNRWA did, particularly in Gaza, is assume that it had already gotten there, so that they had to do, and they put everyone on essentially lockdown. They closed the schools, they set up health centers as triage centers, and again, they started the remote distribution of food and medicine rather than having people come to them, and that's been very effective. So far in Gaza, as of June 21st, around, there are 72 cases. Luckily, they're all contained at the border. So these cases were from people returning to Gaza, the authorities quickly quarantined them, so they've been quarantined at the border. Most recovered, and I think there's about 15 still being quarantined. There are no indigenous cases so far within Gaza, alhamdulillah, and we hope it will remain that way. In the West Bank, there are cases, and in fact, in the last 2 weeks, the cases have surged, like they have in many locations, unfortunately. Again, the UNRWA office there had the same reaction of interventions, of closing down the schools, setting up health centers to do triage, to both test people and help them if they contracted the virus. And also, very importantly, we're doing training for social workers on gender-based violence, because as we know, all over the world, when people are stuck at home, these incidents of gender-based violence unfortunately go up. So UNRWA was very, had a lot of foresight in terms of setting up this training. Unfortunately, just to wrap up, it's not just COVID-19 that's the major threat. Like in the US, people, the reaction, you have to keep people home to keep them safe. There are, there is an economic fallout from that. People lose their jobs, they lose profits. So the economic fallout in a very, in conditions of severe poverty, of course, is very concerning. And so people are facing even more extreme poverty conditions than they were before. We heard of in Lebanon, some of the refugees living in the camps were saying, I'm more, and you can't even say it out loud without feeling the emotion, but they said, we're more scared of starving to death than we are of COVID-19 because of how bad the economy is there, and people just don't have the money sometimes to eat. We've heard of cases in Gaza recently of children really having to find food anywhere they can. So it's a very, very dire situation, only exacerbated by the fact that a huge amount of funding has been taken away from this essential organization. We also, have to, UNRWA is concerned about, of course, as we all are, about the ramifications of, annexation, which Israel has spoken about, obviously. And it's really hard to kind of understand, what may or may not happen. And but we're not a political organization, but there are humanitarian concerns that could come from this annexation, of cutting, Palestinian village, the area around them could be annexed, cutting these villagers off from their health center, from where they could get tested, from where they could get treatment, and the movement of UNRWA workers could be even more constrained by the annexation. One estimate is that more than 30% of Palestinian land could be annexed, and 140,000 Palestinians annexed into Israel. And a lot of these, again, are small pieces of Palestinian land that could be surrounded by Israeli land. So, so we are, UNRWA USA and UNRWA, very concerned about annexation and being able to get these essential services to people in need.
definitely a very dire situation. I think they're facing, well, our Palestinian brothers and sisters are facing the triple threat, the occupation being the first and foremost, COVID, and now, well, also their ongoing cutting of the UNRWA funding, which, the situation's only getting worse and worse. And we're thankful for organizations like UNRWA that are trying whatever they can to alleviate the situation in any way that possible. Doug asks a important follow-up question where he says, how do you expect life in the refugee camps in Palestine to change with this potential annexation plans?
Yeah, so we can talk about it from, this humanitarian viewpoint. Certainly I have my own personal views, but I'll talk as part of the organization, that we are absolutely concerned with additional restrictions to movement, which again affect the ability of individuals who are sick or who need to be tested from getting to health centers. We are talking about populations being cut off from health centers, not only health centers, places of education, schools, and then in turn, the kind of permitting, as you know, to get from one place to another is going to be a whole new set of bureaucracy that is also gonna, and security issues, that's also gonna limit the ability of UNRWA to do its job. And so it is extremely concerning, and Gaza's a different set, Gaza's a very different set of circumstances, but in terms of West Bank, those are the primary concerns. I don't know how it could affect things, if the status quo in Gaza would change, but West Bank is what they're talking about annexing, and we're very concerned.
So with all this being said, what are some of the most what is UNRWA right now trying to prioritize, and how can supporters get involved with these efforts virtually or in any way that they can?
Great. So UNRWA itself, the agency, has had 2 appeals since the COVID-19 crisis came out. And so their second appeal, the first appeal was about $14 for direct treatment, abatement, mitigation and abatement of COVID-19. The second flash appeal is about $93 million. And they just had a pledging conference, virtual pledging conference, and were able to, I guess, like about 59% of that money, 55.1 million, has been pledged, with, just to say 39.4, 42% of that money has actually been received. Hopefully the pledges come in, but there's still 41% of funding that needs to come in to be able to help UNRWA address the economic fallout and economic recovery needed to just get everybody back to the way they were, let alone the development needs and humanitarian needs that they haven't been able to address historically due to lack of funding. So so please, anybody who has it in their hearts, if you're in the U.S., you can donate directly to UNRWA USA, or you can donate directly on our website. It is tax deductible, and we, in turn, our goal is to raise as much money, and that we, in turn, are able to transfer to UNRWA. As UNRWA USA, our mission is to raise funds for UNRWA, and it's also to do advocacy in the United States, so more and more Americans understand the plight of Palestine refugees. And so we have a couple of events coming up ourselves. One is, as Rania, you mentioned, we're transforming our trademark 5K, Gaza 5K walk run event into a virtual event. You may ask, what is a virtual race? Well, I can tell you more about it. It's going to be exciting and different and new. And then that will be in late August, early September timeframe. And then we also have our advocacy day, which will also be virtual, where we will actually be talking directly to our representatives to spread awareness about Palestine refugees and how important UNRWA is. You can go to our website to find out more about Advocacy Day, and also we have an easy format for you to write your congressperson directly, calling for the reinstatement of U.S. government funds to UNRWA.
Thank you very much. I added the website in the chat. It's a very easy website, UnderUSA.org. Please make sure to check it out and to support in any way that you can. So Hanam asked a very important question following up to our conversations about the schools. Have UNRWA schools been able to continue teaching despite the shutdown?
Yeah, so they have been doing distance learning, like many of us are, as parents. Those of you who are parents have experienced with your children. At least we do here in where I am in Maryland. So they actually, and from all accounts, I understand that it's going better. Certainly, perhaps even than many of us have experienced, in that we just weren't prepared. At least in my county, they've tried their best, but nobody was prepared for this moment. I think UNRWA was pretty well prepared. So people have been doing distance learning. Of course, like here, that relies on internet connectivity, which, you know, certainly not everyone has, and particularly in the, I've understood in the refugee camps in Lebanon, there are issues about internet connectivity. And, you know, of course, it requires somebody having a computer, access to the computer in their house, etc. Even before the COVID-19 crisis, because of the limitations in funding, UNRWA was having to increase the size of each classroom. There were fewer teachers they could pay. So already the education had been affected by the funding crisis, and, you know, with COVID-19, they're doing the best they can, but you know, it's certainly not in person.
Yeah, and I think that's been the challenge of the educational system across the world, is figuring out how can you do the best you can, given everything that's going on. So the next question I have is related to the United States cutting the funding. Are there any signs that the U.S. government may reinstate funding for UNRWA?
Despite all of our best efforts and those of some amazing senators, Senator Sanders, Senator Warren, Senator Chris Van Hollen, who have, you know, written directly to Secretary Pompeo and others, demanding the reinstatement of funds. There has been no movement in the current administration to reinstate those funds. We are waiting, like everybody else, to see in November what happens. The Biden campaign has indicated that they will reinstate the funding. Where we, you know, this is what we're waiting to find out, you know, if that holds true, if the administration would change.
Well, Nur asked a great follow-up question. Has the European Union been able to help in funding in any way?
Yes, absolutely. The European Union has continued their funding. I think the EU is the second biggest funder as an entity. Germany is first on this. This is on the latest appeal. Germany, then EU, and then China, followed by France, the UK, and some funds from Saudi Arabia that have been pledged. The funding traditionally has been kind of Europe, the US, and the Gulf. So we're still waiting to hear, or UNRWA is still waiting to hear on whether there'll be more contributions from the Gulf. Europe is doing most right now to hold UNRWA together.
So building on all of this, what can people in New Jersey do to get our opinion about the work that UNRWA does to our elected officials?
Yeah, excellent question. So you can definitely go onto our website and you can see how to get involved. You can link onto how to get involved, and as I mentioned, there will be information about upcoming advocacy day there, and there is an opportunity for you to fill out a pre-made letter, just put in your name, which is again calling on your Congress, your representatives in Congress to push the administration to reinstate funding for UNRWA. So please, that would be the first place to go, and then continue to lobby your representatives to tell them how important this is to you as a constituency, and certainly, as you had mentioned, Rania, in the beginning of the call, you know, if Arab Americans are thought, you know, they have this, they are counted, and they're, you know, their role in American politics. And by the way, it's not just Arab Americans. There are many Americans of all, you know, of all backgrounds who are supporting these issues. But the more that you can talk about how important this is to your representatives, you know, we hope more people will listen, and something important can change.
And I'm increasingly learning the importance of talking to your representatives. I know a lot of times we get, you know, like thinking it's not going to actually make a difference, when in fact it does. They do tally up the different topics we come to them about, and really do keep that in mind. So definitely call, let's make sure we all call our representatives and make sure that they know that this is something we all care about, and that's very important to us.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to transition to our next question. So as you and UNRWA USA plan for the coming year, what are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think that I have been inspired working at UnderUSA USA by, I'm sure you feel this way too in your community, by just this community of supporters that we've built over the last 8 or so years of a really committed, supportive group. And frankly, we have a lot of youth who support us, young people who support us, young people and families, and there's an energy and a joy that I've seen, and that energy and that joy gives me hope in these dark times. So I hope with our upcoming virtual 5K, because it's virtual, we can go nationwide. I hope we can take that joy that we have during the 5K events. I only got to do one in New York just before COVID, but seeing the energy of people, having local food from halal guys, doing debka, having a DJ, seeing families come together, again, in a hard moment for Palestinians, for other disadvantaged communities around the world. And it just makes you smile when things are really bad. And I think that joy is how we get through life. So I think that we want to spread the joy while we address these major challenges. And we hope to do that with our next 5K. We want to, with that, spreading the joy, we hope that more and more Americans can understand the plight of the refugees and can support our programs. We definitely hope to grow. And I think if I speak just personally for a second, a particular objective of mine is, I don't know if you guys talk about this, but you talk about preaching to the converted or preaching to the non-converted. I want to talk to people who might not understand as much and say, hey, this is what's going on. We all tend to talk to our communities who understand the conflict, who understand each other, but how do we get outside that to more Americans who share our values but may not understand exactly the situation of Palestine refugees? I want to do more in that realm. And then finally, this is a moment of change in our country. We came by it in a difficult, very difficult, painful way with the death of so many young African Americans at the hands, unfortunately, of police. I feel like the protests and the mass support that we're getting in the streets represents a turning point. I think we ourselves are looking inward, as most organizations are, about how we can support this cause, how we can really educate ourselves, that is Black Lives Matter. And I think that more and more Americans, as they come to understand the Black Lives Matter movement, and as we educate ourselves more on this issue, might also understand injustice and persecution and oppression overseas. So my hope is that this will, broaden the movement for this kind of justice globally.
Yeah, and my new favorite quote that I've been saying over and over: an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And I think that is no more true than, seeing the parallels between the Black Lives Matter movement and what's going on in Palestine, specifically with the refugee crisis. So Hanam asked a very important question. What more for the Palestinian diaspora would you like to see?
What in terms of engagement of the Palestinian diaspora?
Yes.
Yes. So I can't help but take that question and say, we'd love for you to join the virtual 5K. We want you to fundraise in your community, get the word out. We actually had a very famous member of the Palestinian diaspora community, if you can call her this, Bella Hadid. She actually posted on her Instagram to her 30 million followers, please support UNRWA USA, which we were very, very happy to see. So we want to get the word out, and we want to see you at our events, to see you on our social media. You bring us joy. You make us feel like we can change the world, and we just invite your participation at every step of the way. So just, we'll get to you. My director of communications, my director of philanthropy know a lot of people, and we'll be sure to get to you. But if we don't, you come to us.
Definitely. So Doug's asking, I know there are quite a few residents of the refugee camps who are students at Dar al-Karima University College. Is there a working relationship with UNRWA?
I can't answer that, Doug. It's a very good question. I wish I could answer specifically, but I myself don't know. I can definitely find out and get back to you.
I guess a somewhat similar question that comes to mind is, I know that UNRWA has been trying to set up like an alumni network of some sort.
Yes.
Which I thought was a very fabulous idea, because you can always benefit so much from an alumni network, aside from success stories, giving back. There's so much that can happen. So can you talk a little bit more about that, and how, if someone would want to get involved, how they can get involved through that?
Yes, great question. Yes, we do have a newly formed last year UNRWA Alumni Association, led by an amazing woman, Nada Kablawi, from Lebanon, and grew up in a refugee camp, and is an extremely successful woman. I think she was the first female graduate in engineering in Lebanon, or one of the first, and now lives in Virginia. She's heading the organization. She's the chairperson right now, and it's filled with stories of, people, and including frankly the head of our board of directors, Hassan Salame, grew up in the most impoverished conditions, made it to the US, and became extremely successful, and are now using their success and their knowledge to give back. So we invite absolutely alumni of UNRWA who are in the US, whether you're recent graduates. I know a family from Gaza who are the extremely accomplished academically, going to Harvard and Stanford and everywhere, and getting doctors and lawyers. Please join feel free to look up our association on the website, join the association, and help advocate for your brothers and sisters who are going to UNRWA schools and living back home in more difficult conditions.
I remember when I first heard about it, I thought it was a very great idea, because I know a lot of people who come to us that always say, they went to the schools from Al-Wakala or from UNRWA, and they were very proud of the fact that they've been there. So I think it's a great way to connect people around the world that have benefited from the great services of UNRWA. I guess my last question, and again, if anyone, the audience has been wonderful with all the beautiful questions they've been asking. So if anyone has any last questions, this is the time to ask. My question is, where do you see the role of refugees in the Palestinian struggle, and in the path to liberation? What do you see their role is, and how do you, I guess, see the work of UNRWA playing into that?
Yeah, we by definition are non-political. We are humanitarian. I think it's just at the core, UNRWA continues to exist because there is no political situation, because there is not there's no solution, just solution for people who are refugeed as a result of the creation of Israel and the following wars. So, essentially, we will continue to exist. We have to exist. The work has to be done because there is not an alternative in terms of the humanitarian need. But we can only hope that someday, inshallah, there is a just solution, and then that day there won't be a need for UNRWA, and we will gladly do a different job. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, I actually remember that was a constant thing in the refugee camp. They said that UNRWA's kind of thing was, we want to become out of job. That's
yes,
our goal. That's what we're looking for, is to empower the community so that we don't have to, be there and do different things, which is why I personally always loved UNRWA.
Yes, absolutely.
So with that, I guess, do you have any closing words for everybody, for our wonderful audience members?
No, just thank you guys. Thank you all for tuning in. I am in a constant search to learn more myself and to know more. So happy to hear from any of you. Any good books to read, anything else that I can do to educate myself about the Palestinian cause. I know a fair amount, but I can always learn more. So yatik al-afiyah, as you said, Rania, in the beginning. Shukran ktir kulkum. And I hope to see you in person in New Jersey, inshallah. So yes. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Yes, it's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you more, and I'm even more excited to get to meet you in person. Hopefully, once everything goes back to the new normal,
we
can meet up at some point So thank you so much for what you're doing for our community. Thank you so much for what you're doing for Palestinian refugees. And thank you for all your work as part of UNRWA USA. And thank you all to our wonderful audience members for tuning in. Like I said, this is going to be our last weekly series. We're going to start transitioning to bi-weekly. So our next session will be on July 13th. We will be sending out emails and advertising so that everybody can make sure they tune in then. So please remember again to take the census. It is really important that we count and we are represented. So please make sure to take the census. If you have any questions, always call PAC. We're more than happy to help you in any way that we can. These webinars are brought to you by PAC. Don't forget to see a full list of all our upcoming events and our summer programming, and to donate to keep these programming going. Please visit www.paccusa.org. We hope to see you in our future webinars and programming. Thank you again, Mara. Thank you very much
Thank you, Rania.
for everything. Thank you, UNRWA USA, and a special shout out to Leila for coordinating and helping make this all happen. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you soon.
Thanks.